In this video tutorial, we're going to still be covering inventory, and we're going to cover in particular how blank product is added to your physical inventory. So what we're talking about here with physical inventory, we're talking about our physical inventory module, inventory on the shelf. This is our physical inventory. And so what we want to show you here is the normal process of how you would get that product onto the shelf. Now, in previous versions of OnSite, you were forced to use what was called an inventory sales order. And that was designed specifically for the case where you want to say, okay, I want to go out and buy 5,000 of a product and keep it on my shelf. Now, in OnSite 7, you do not have to use an inventory sales order to get product onto the shelf. You could actually have any kind of sales order with an item on it, and that item is an item that's going to be going into inventory. So for the rest of this tutorial, I'm still going to show you how we do it through an inventory sales order, but just keep in mind that with any kind of sales order, you could do the same kind of functionality. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on View All. I've already created a sales order in the system. And if you go down to the bottom, you'll see we have an inventory order. It's the very last order in the system in my demo here. And I'm going to view that order. And there's no customer information. There's no design information. This is for blank product. So if I click on line items, you'll see that it's empty. The invoice tab is empty. This is a new feature in OnSite where you can actually have items that are work order items only. So when you're looking at an inventory sales order, this is only going to be on the work order. It's not going to be on the invoice. We're not charging anyone for it. So see the tutorials on order entry for more details on how line items work and the whole process for order entry. We're not going to cover that in this tutorial, but what we want to cover is how an order is used for the flow of inventory. So on this particular order, we have some blank T-shirts. We've ordered 144 of them, or we have them on the order. They actually haven't been ordered yet. And let's go ahead and pull up that line item. And you'll see that this line item has behaviors associated with it. Now, again, this is beyond the scope of this tutorial, but each line item is related to a product. Each product has a product class. That product class is linked to the order type, and the combination of the product class and the order type controls these behaviors. So these are defaults, and I can change them on any specific line item, on any specific sales order if I have proper access rights. And again, all of that information is covered in more detail in our order entry series of tutorials. But what I can see here is the product source. This particular item is going to be purchased. There's going to be no production done on it. It's a blank item. When we're done with that item, we're going to either ship it, or the customer would pick it up. But basically this means the customer would get it, or we add it to our inventory, and then I have whether or not I want to invoice someone for it. So this is a very simple case. This is an inventory purchase only. There's no other craziness going on here. However, you could do a lot of cool things here. For example, I could put this into inventory, and then I could charge somebody for it. I could charge a customer for it. I could put this into inventory and with a design on it, so that would make it, I could do it as like a finished product. So there's a lot of different lot of power here that we're not going to cover in this tutorial, but these are the settings for a basic inventory item. So that's all that's essentially being done on order entry. But now let's take this order, let's take it through the rest of the on-site process and see how this affects both our physical inventory and also our general ledger inventory. So the next step in the process is purchasing. And my buttons here, this is my intra-order navigation. So this is sales, this is purchasing. So we're going to do a very simple case. And I could get complicated with this, but I'm not. We're going to buy these for $2 from Atlantic Coast Cotton. I'm going to go ahead and create my purchase order. And of course, we have separate tutorials covering the complete purchase ordering process. I'm not going to fill out a lot of information, which I would recommend that you do in reality fill out. And actually, I am going to put in here, I'll put in a shipping amount because I'm going to use this as an example later. And I would put in my shipping method. And I'm going to put in an invoice number. So I'll put in some basics. And now I'm going to go ahead and issue the purchase order. Now again, I'm giving you an overview of the entire inventory process. Each one of these subjects I'm going to be going through, for instance here purchasing, has hours of tutorials and documentation on how to do the whole process. So I'm just doing summary information for you here. So we've issued our purchase order. Now I'm going to go to receiving for this particular order. And I'm going to do a very simple case of, and you can see here this is highlighted. It's indicated it's an inventory item. And I'm going to go ahead and receive it. So to receive the item, I click on Receive All. If I had multiple items, it would receive all of them. Or I can receive an individual item. Now I've received it, and I can look at the items that have been received, and if necessary, I can delete that receiving, the fact that I've received that. So let's go back and let's receive it again. That item has now been received, and if I click on the Inventory tab, I can also mark that item as being processed. So it's been received, and it's actually been processed now. Now if I go over to my physical inventory module, and let's go to individual transactions, and let's click on View All, and if I go down to the bottom, you'll see there's the items that have been added to inventory. There's our 5180 Haynes BVT. It's an auto add from order 1729. And if I go back to sales, that's the order that we are on. So that item has physically now been added to my inventory. So that is done during the receiving process on a blank item. Now let's go ahead to the invoicing section of the software for this order. And if I click on work order, I see the item that was on the work order, and it's already been added to inventory. So now all I need to do is simply invoice the order. So to do that, I'm simply going to go over to invoice date. I could type in my invoice date, or if I just say mark as invoiced, it will put today's date in there. So when I say mark as invoiced, it stamps it with my date, the date and time for user, and or date and user, excuse me, and also the invoice date, which could have been changed before I invoiced it. And if I click on the General Ledger tab, I will see the General Ledger's entries that were made. So let's look at what's going on General Ledger wise. Inventory work in progress has been decreased by $288. That's a reduction. The reason I know it's a reduction is because it's indicated in red. My inventory has been increased $288, and that's the General Ledger component of my physical inventory. Now, if I go to the product setup, let's just look at the product setup. I already have it selected for the 5180. You'll notice that under modifiers, we do not have any modifiers that are affecting the inventory value. That's why it's only came up at $2.88. Or excuse me, $288 for 144 items, which is $2 each, which is what we purchased the product at. Now the other setting we have, if we go back to Utilities and go to General Ledger Defaults, the other setting we have is we're allowing recording of inventory from the current level if available. If not, use this account. Well, if we go back to go back to Inventory, let's look at current levels. And we're on the 5180 Haynes BVT. And notice for this current level, there is no default General Ledger account for this particular current level. So therefore, it reverts to the system-wide default. So if we go back to our invoicing, that's where these entries came from. Now, the way these might be different is, on my current level, if I had a separate general ledger account for that particular product, let's say inventory t-shirts, this would say inventory t-shirts. That's the part that was increased. The part that's decreased is always our inventory work in progress. Now also, the dollar amount might change if we had any product modifiers tied to the product. Then the actual value might be different as well. The value of the work in progress, or excuse me, the value of the inventory would be different. The value of this inventory work in progress would actually be the same. It'd be 288, and then you'd have some other entries that would be for the other things that are related to your product modifiers. We'll cover that in another scenario. Now, you might say, why does this order have to be invoiced? Well, the reason it has to be invoiced is because that's when the general ledger entries are made. So the invoicing process, in this case, there is actually no invoice for sending to someone, but the invoicing process is saying this order is done, make the general ledger entries. The last point I'd like to make before finishing this tutorial is, again, that keep in mind I used an inventory sales order, but you could do all this functionality on a single sales order. So I could have a sales order that would have other product that's not coming or going into out of inventory, but I could still have this transaction on it. So just keep that in mind.